Have you ever stopped to think that sometimes the most dangerous thing in war isn't what soldiers see, but precisely what nobody sees? That's exactly what happened that day, when an entire platoon marched as if everything were normal, without imagining that each step could be their last. There were no explosions, no shots, no warnings, just silence. Too much silence. And it was in that silence that a single dog noticed something that the men, with all the experience in the world, couldn't see. A small hidden detail, but capable of killing everyone there in a matter of seconds. The road was narrow, full of loose dirt and recent tire tracks. The soldiers walked at an automatic pace, tired, sweaty, thinking only of the next few kilometers. No one suspected that this tranquility was precisely the clearest sign that something was very wrong. But the K9, unlike them, stopped. It froze. It growled softly. It didn't move forward even with the tug on the leash. It wasn't stubbornness. It was alert. It was pure instinct saying, if you take one more step, it's over. The soldier in charge of the dog immediately found it strange. He recognized that behavior. He had seen the dog react like that before when sniffing out bodies, mines, and enemy patrol tracks. But this time it was different. The K9 wasn't just sniffing, it was refusing to advance, as if it were facing something that couldn't be ignored. The rest of the troop only realized something was wrong when the soldier raised his hand, telling everyone to freeze where they were. The atmosphere changed instantly. No one knew what was happening, but everyone knew that in war, when a K9 freezes like that, it's no accident. The men began to look around, trying to understand what the dog had sensed. A smell, a vibration in the ground, an almost invisible wire buried in the earth. Nothing made sense, but the tension began to grow, as if the air were getting heavier. The soldier knelt slowly beside the dog, trying to understand what he had found. The animal's breathing was rapid and focused. Its snout would lower and rise in the same spot, insistently, as if there was something there, beneath the earth, waiting for the right moment to destroy everything. And it is precisely here that the story takes a turn, because what seemed like just another day of marching turned into the beginning of one of the most unexpected discoveries of that entire campaign. The kind of discovery that no one records in a book, that no one sees in a photo, but that saves lives in an incredible way. And all thanks to the sense of smell of a puppy that refused to take a step. And the most impressive detail? They still had no idea that that strange spot hid not only a trap, but a much larger plan, something that could have changed the fate of the entire company if it hadn't been discovered at that exact moment. It was the tip of a German scheme so well orchestrated that it seemed impossible to dismantle. But it all started there, with a K9 stopped in the middle of the road, staring at the ground as if it were about to explode. If you think this is tense enough, wait until you find out what was really buried there, because what they found wasn't just dangerous, it was intelligent. It was precise, it was deadly, and nobody was prepared. Did you notice how a simple detail that no one saw almost turned into a huge tragedy? If this beginning already made you tense, imagine what's still to come. Before continuing, let me ask. Do something quick. Don't forget to like because this helps the channel a lot, and sign up to follow each story we bring here. And feel free to comment below. Which city are you watching from? I want to know how far this story is going. Let's continue, because the next part is even more surprising. The platoon advanced along the road as if simply completing another stage of the war routine. Heavy steps in the mud, equipment swaying on their shoulders, labored breathing, no one speaking because everyone was already at their limit. It was one of those silent marches where no one wants to talk, no one complains, no one looks to the sides. Each one is trapped in their own head, thinking about the next outpost, the next shelter, the next day they need to survive. The silence was only broken by the sound of equipment hitting their bodies, and that made everything even stranger. In war, when only the equipment makes noise, it's a sign that something is wrong. But no one there, really, noticed. No one except the dog. The K9 walked attentively, 2 steps ahead of the soldier responsible for him. He was a German shepherd, trained to detect explosives and hidden clues. But that day, his posture seemed more serious than usual. He wasn't just sniffing the ground, he was analyzing every inch of the road, as if there was some secret buried there. The soldier noticed the animal was restless, but thought it was just tiredness. The platoon had been on this walk for hours, and even the dog, was showing signs of weariness. But then something unusual happened. The K9 stopped abruptly, dug his paws into the mud, and pulled his body back, freezing as if an invisible wall were blocking the way. The soldier almost tripped when he felt the leash tighten. He looked at the dog and saw the typical alert expression: the rigid body, the downed tail, the ears pointed forward, the snout pressed to the ground. It was the posture he had learned to identify as "something's here." But the problem was that looking at the road there was nothing, absolutely nothing, just mud, dust, dry leaves and old wheel tracks. But the dog didn't care about appearances. He sensed what human eyes couldn't see. The soldier raised his hand, ordering everyone to stop. The troops obeyed instantly, because no one questions such a command on enemy soil. Some were annoyed, thinking it was just another delay. Others, more experienced, immediately became alert. The lieutenant approached slowly, asking what was happening. The soldier didn't answer immediately. He simply pointed to the dog as if that were explanation enough. And it really was, at least for those with enough service time to know that when a K9 freezes like that, no one takes another step until they find out why. The dog began sniffing more intensely, with short, focused movements, as if trying to pinpoint the exact location of the danger. He would scratch the ground with his paw, stop, sniff again, back away, and scratch again. This specific behavior was known among trainers. It wasn't a reaction to the smell of an enemy, a body, or food. It was a reaction to an explosive, a wire, a trap, a mechanism, something artificial and dangerous hidden beneath the surface. The soldier knelt beside the dog, but didn't dare touch the ground. In that kind of situation, even a light touch could be enough to trigger a detonator. He simply observed the K9's behavior, trying to recognize the pattern. The lieutenant, seeing the dog retreat, repeatedly understood that this wasn't a simple suspicion. It was certainty. And when a trained dog is certain, you believe first and ask questions later. Tension began to spread among the soldiers. One of them asked if it could be a mine. Another replied that a mine wouldn't make a dog retreat like that. It seemed like something bigger, perhaps a more complex mechanism. A third commented, almost whispering, that it was too strange that the road was so empty and so silent. Normally, when there are no debris, bodies, gunfire, or movement, it's because the enemy has prepared the way for something worse. And as these comments circulated, the atmosphere grew even heavier. Even the air seemed denser. The soldier tried to pull the dog back, and the K9 obeyed, but without taking its eyes off the spot where it had stopped. It was as if it were guarding that piece of land, warning the group that no one should get close. The lieutenant ordered one of the combat engineers to approach slowly, with the utmost care. The engineer knelt a few meters before the spot, opened his backpack and began preparing the detection tools. He knew that any wrong move could cost everyone's lives there, so every gesture was slow, calculated, almost choreographed. Meanwhile, the soldier holding the dog felt his heart race. He trusted the animal's instincts more than his own perceptions. The K9 had saved lives before, had identified traps that no one else would have seen. But the way it froze that day, that was different. It was as if the dog was facing something bigger than ordinary mines, something carefully prepared, with the real intention of killing many people at once. And that's where the feeling arises that something huge is about to be discovered. Because that whole scene, the silence, the dog standing still, the soldiers exchanging glances, the seemingly clear road, didn't match a simple threat. There was something hidden there, something planned, calculated, and deadly. And the truth is, if the dog hadn't stopped at that exact meter of dirt, the entire platoon would have walked straight to the center of a scheme that no one imagined existed. The scariest part? That was just the beginning. What was buried there would reveal that the entire road was a giant trap, and that the enemy wasn't just waiting for someone to step on the wrong spot, but watching everything from a distance, ready to detonate a perfect ambush. The K9 not only sensed the danger, he prevented death. And no one yet had any idea of the magnitude of that. The combat engineer approached slowly, but while he prepared his tools, the soldier in charge of the K9 couldn't take his eyes off the dog. It was as if the animal was locked on another level of perception, sensing a threat that had yet to take shape for anyone else. In the soldier's head, a question hammered incessantly. What exactly did you find now? He had seen the dog sniff out mines, ammunition remnants, loose wires, but he had never seen That combination of tension and persistence. The dog wasn't just signaling danger. It seemed to know that something capable of killing dozens of men at once was there. The soldier was breathing rapidly, and it wasn't just because of the heavy backpack or the long march. It was fear, real fear. Fear of that feeling that life hung by an invisible thread. When the engineer asked him to pull the dog further back, he obeyed immediately. But as he retreated, he felt the canine pull on the leash forward, as if wanting to ensure they continued paying attention to that specific point. It wasn't stubbornness. It was urgency. The lieutenant knelt beside the engineer, who was using a small metal rod to probe the ground without applying direct weight. The soldier watched everything with a racing heart, and while he did so, his mind recalled every moment when that dog had been crucial. Like in France, when the K9 found a wire caught between two trees that looked like just a broken branch. Or in Belgium, when the dog sniffed out gunpowder inside a box buried under snow. In all these situations, lives were saved because the animal sensed the danger before any human being. But on that road, in that absurd silence, the dog's behavior had a different weight. Something much greater was hidden there. The engineer suddenly raised his head, his face tense. He carefully removed some of the earth, and soon something so thin it seemed impossible to see appeared. A dark, delicate cable, almost blending in, with the dry roots. A detonating cable. The soldier felt his stomach churn. That type of cable was only used when the enemy wanted to ensure the explosion was perfect, timed, and impossible to escape. It wasn't a simple mine. It was part of a system. The entire platoon stood motionless, as if everyone had stopped breathing at the same time. The engineer demanded absolute silence and began to remove the earth around the cable, revealing a few more centimeters. With each movement, another piece appeared, as if the ground were full of metallic veins ready to explode. The soldier tightened the leash, and the dog continued to stare fixedly at the point, like a guard. And then came the second shock. The cable split in two different directions. One ran along the edge of the road, the other crossed the path and disappeared under the vegetation to the right. This was unusual. It wasn't improvised. It was high-level planning. The soldier felt a shiver run down his spine. The kind of trap with multiple wires is never designed to catch just one group. It's meant to catch an entire company, maybe two. His mind began to fill with rapid and frightening hypotheses. If that cable was there, where did it end? Who was controlling it on the other end? How many charges were connected? And worse, how many soldiers were about to walk in that direction, unaware that each step was a death sentence? Meanwhile, the surrounding environment seemed to shrink. The forest, once just a lifeless landscape, now seemed teeming with watching eyes. Every tree seemed to hide someone. Every stone seemed to have a purpose. It was as if, all of a sudden, everything had gained meaning, and all of it bad. The soldier looked ahead and imagined the rest of the company coming down the road unsuspecting. His throat tightened. If we don't stop, they'll all die, he thought. The engineer asked the soldier to hold the flashlight, and he lit it with a trembling hand. The beam of light revealed something even more terrifying. Small metallic fragments buried deeper, precisely aligned. It was a connected system, not just a single charge. This meant that the dog hadn't just saved that group, it had saved an entire contingent that would have followed. The lieutenant clenched his teeth and whispered, "This isn't just a trap. This is a perfect ambush." And that sentence hit the soldier like a punch, because at that moment he understood that war wasn't just about gunfire and hidden soldiers. It was about intelligence, patience, and sometimes things so small that only a dog could sense them. The canine remained motionless, staring at the ground as if it were the enemy, and the soldier, observing the scene, realized he was facing something far greater than a simple, interrupted march. He was facing the chance to prevent a massacre. The engineer cleaned another section of the cable and stopped suddenly. He saw something that completely changed his expression. The soldier noticed it immediately, and, for a second, nobody moved. What the engineer had found was too big to be a coincidence. It was the kind of discovery that would change everyone's destiny, and it only existed because a dog decided not to take another step. The soldier swallowed hard, feeling the sheer weight of the war fall upon him. He knew in that instant that everything that would happen from then on depended on what was about to be revealed, and none of it seemed simple, or small, or ordinary. It was the kind of threat so well planned that, If it weren't for the K9, no one would have ever noticed. And now finally they were about to see what was really hiding beneath that too quiet road. The engineer took a deep breath and signaled for the lieutenant to come closer. His expression wasn't just one of concern, it was one of shock. He pushed back the earth a little more, revealing a small metal fitting, then wiped away a thin layer of dust clinging to the mechanism with the back of his hand. When the soldier saw what was appearing, the air seemed to catch its breath for a second. It wasn't just any cable, it was a remote firing module, a complex detonator protected by waxed plastic and wrapped in camouflage fabric. This meant only one thing. Someone, somewhere in the forest, was waiting for the right moment to pull a trigger and blow everything up. The soldier felt his stomach churn. A contact explosion was horrible, but an explosion controlled by an enemy observer was worse. It was planned. It was cold. It was millimeter precise, and worst of all, it was invisible until the very last second. If the dog hadn't stopped, none of them would have noticed this buried system. And if that detonator was there, it was obvious that wasn't all. What they were seeing was just the entry point to the enemy's plan. The engineer continued cleaning carefully and found something else. 2 more smaller wires, branching off in different directions, creating an underground network. The soldier swallowed hard. This wasn't a makeshift trap set by soldiers in a hurry. This was the work of specialized German engineers, people trained to assemble explosives that seemed invisible even to Allied experts. The main cable ran along the edge of the road, but now another wire could be seen going to the left and a third disappearing into the tall grass on the right. A younger soldier, observing from afar, exclaimed, "My God, this is huge, isn't it?" The lieutenant gave him a quick glance, the kind that silences anyone. The lieutenant's posture alone gave away the size of the problem. He leaned forward again, assessing the tangle of cables, and realized that several charges were interconnected. It wasn't a concentrated explosion, it was a multiple chain reaction. If activated, it wouldn't just kill the platoon. It would open up enormous craters and send a rain of shrapnel sweeping the road for almost 200 meters. The soldier holding the K9 felt his hands sweat. He looked at the dog, which remained motionless, ears perked up, and gaze fixed on the same point. It seemed the animal was waiting for confirmation that the humans had finally understood the gravity of the situation. The soldier felt a strange mixture of pride, fear, and gratitude. Pride because the pup had saved everyone, fear because he imagined what would have happened if the K9 had taken just one more step. Gratitude because in that war, it wasn't common to survive thanks to such a small detail. The engineer then found the first explosive. He pushed aside the earth and exposed a metal cylinder with German markings engraved on it. It was a type of charge that exploded not only to kill, but also to destroy structures, clear paths, and create larger traps afterward. At least 6 of these cylinders were connected to the same cable, and that was only what could be seen on the surface. The feeling that the terrain concealed much more began to grow among everyone. The lieutenant gave a quick order. No one move. No one speak loudly. No one step outside of what's already been stepped on. He called 2 more experienced soldiers and ordered them to climb a small hill to the left to observe the forest. "If this place is being controlled from a distance, there are Germans watching us right now," the lieutenant said, his voice tense. The phrase landed heavily on the group. It was like imagining an enemy finger resting on a button, waiting for the exact moment to turn them all to pieces. The K9 soldier kept his eyes fixed on the dog. It was as if the animal was hearing something humans couldn't. He trembled almost imperceptibly, but not from fear, from focus. The soldier realized that if the dog was so attentive, there was still more to discover, and that certainty almost made his chest sink. If the K9 was indicating that this wasn't all, then the German plan was bigger than they had imagined. The 2 soldiers who had climbed the hill returned running a few minutes later, gesturing desperately. The way they were coming made it clear they had found something bad. When they got close, one of them said between quick breaths, "There's an old hut, and there's movement inside." Binoculars picked up shadows of people. The other added, "There's an antenna, an improvised antenna. They're watching from up here." The lieutenant squinted and cursed under his breath. A cabin with an antenna, positioned high up, with a direct view of the road. That explained everything. They weren't just passing through a booby-trapped trail. They were in the middle of a coordinated ambush. If it weren't for the dog, they would have been blown up at the exact moment the entire company was within maximum range of the charges. The soldier felt a surge of adrenaline. This moment wasn't just dangerous, it was crucial. If they didn't act fast, the Germans could detonate everything without even setting foot on the point. And now that the group had stopped and huddled together, it was even worse. They were exposed. The lieutenant took a deep breath and said in a low, firm voice, "The dog saved you. Now we need to save those who are still coming after us." And that sentence marked the turning point. It wasn't just a discovery, it was a race against time. And at that moment, the soldier understood the magnitude of the responsibility he held. It wasn't just about surviving, it was about preventing a massacre that was minutes away from happening. The K9 gave a short bark, a warning, as if to say, "It's not over yet." And indeed, nothing was even close to being over. What they had found was only half the truth. The other half was hidden in the cabin, and it would be even worse. The lieutenant quickly gathered the most experienced men and explained the situation in a short, dry tone. They had two options: try to retreat and hope the Germans wouldn't detonate everything, or advance silently to the hut to neutralize whoever was controlling the firing. Retreating seemed safe, but it was only an illusion. If the enemy was already watching, they only needed to see the group moving to activate the system, and time was working against them. The entire company was already on its way, marching without knowing they were about to enter a precisely planned kill zone. The soldier felt his heart clench. The dog had done its part. Now it was up to them to act before it was too late. Two scouts approached the lieutenant and confirmed the information. The cabin was located on high ground, with a clear view of the road. The antenna was crude, assembled from pieces of metal, wires, and an improvised battery. This meant that the Germans were receiving real-time information from somewhere, perhaps from a moving patrol or another hidden observer. The lieutenant looked around and realized that any sudden movement could give away their intentions. If the Germans understood that the trap had been discovered, they would detonate everything immediately. The plan had to be silent and quick. The soldier in charge of the K9 was uneasy. He had seen the dog in dangerous situations before, but not like this. The animal remained fixed on the ground, as if there was still something there they hadn't seen. The soldier crouched beside him and whispered, "Calm down, partner. We'll figure this out." But he wasn't sure of anything. War taught him that nothing was guaranteed, and that even the smartest plan could end in disaster. The engineer, still examining the main cable, made another disturbing discovery. The cable wasn't just attached to explosive charges. It was also secured to small buried stakes aligned along a bend in the road, a system known for scattering metal shrapnel at high speed, like thousands of invisible blades. The soldier felt his throat tighten. This wasn't just a roadblock. It was a trap designed to kill as many soldiers as possible in seconds, and the company behind was marching straight into this destruction zone. The lieutenant made a quick decision. 3 men would proceed to the left, using the hill as cover. The K9 soldier would go along because the dog was the only one there capable of detecting possible traps along the way. The rest of the group would remain motionless, maintaining their current position without making any movement that could raise suspicion. "One wrong step and we all explode," the lieutenant said before leaving. The phrase kept hammering in the soldier's head as he adjusted his backpack and prepared his rifle. The trio began to move up the hill. The terrain was uneven, full of roots and dry branches that could crack and give away their position. The tension increased with every meter. The soldier felt sweat trickling down his back, cold despite the temperature not being low. The K9, however, was advancing with absolute caution. The pup sniffed every point on the ground before placing its paw, as if drawing an invisible map. The soldier didn't understand how the animal could sense all that, but he trusted it completely. It was the only chance to reach the cabin without triggering a trap. With each step, the feeling of being watched intensified. The hill was too silent. The soldier could hear his own heart pounding in his ears. He thought of the rest of his company, the men who trusted him, the weight of the responsibility he held in his hands. Sometimes, survival didn't come from training, but from decisions made in seconds, and this was one of them. When they reached a higher point, from where it was possible to partially see the hut, the soldier froze. The hut seemed abandoned, but it had a detail that betrayed the enemy's presence. An improvised curtain, made of burlap sack, moved slightly as if someone were hiding behind it. The lieutenant signaled for everyone to duck. They stood watching for long seconds until a shadow was projected quickly on the wall. There was at least one person inside. The lieutenant made a quick gesture with his hand, indicating that they were going to surround the area. The K9 sniffed the air and then lowered its head, indicating that the danger still existed further ahead. As they approached the hut, the soldier noticed something that made his stomach churn. Another network of cables, this time attached to small nails driven into the ground. If anyone stepped there, it would activate a silent alarm inside the hut. The Germans would know immediately that they were being surrounded. The dog was essential at that moment. It circled the area, guiding the soldier along a safe path. The lieutenant followed, sweating profusely, while trying to spot all the danger points. When they reached the back of the hut, they heard a low voice speaking in German. It was a short dialogue, almost as if someone were receiving instructions by radio. The soldier felt a chill run through his body. If they delayed another minute, the Germans might trigger the detonator. The lieutenant raised 3 fingers, then 2, then 1. The soldier took a deep breath, gripped his rifle tightly, and felt the K9 tense beside him, ready to react to the slightest movement. When the lieutenant gave the final signal, they stormed the cabin, knocking down the old wooden door and pointing their weapons inside. What they saw inside confirmed the worst. 2 German operators sitting next to a radio with the detonator right in the center of the table. One of them already had his hand outstretched towards the device. If they had arrived 5 seconds later, it would all have been over, and there would have been no one left to tell the tale. She was the perfect ambush, and now, finally, they were face to face with the one who had planned it all. And the soldier knew that this was only the beginning of the real confrontation. The impact of the invasion was immediate. The 2 German operators froze the instant they saw the American soldiers breaking through the door. The one who already had his hand outstretched for the detonator tried to react, but didn't have time. The K9 advanced before anyone, growling loudly, a precise jump, knocking the German to the ground and preventing him from touching the device. The soldier ran after him, pulled the dog back at the right moment, and pointed his rifle at the fallen man, while the lieutenant relieved the other operator. The scene lasted seconds, but seemed to have happened in slow motion. Every detail there defined the life or death of dozens of men on the road. The lieutenant kicked the detonator away like someone brushing off a venomous snake. The engineer, still breathless from the climb, entered soon after and ran to the device. He looked at the small set of wires, buttons, and battery and swore. It was a modern system for the standards of that time, with redundancy to ensure the explosion would occur even if a wire was cut. The soldier watched everything in silence, while holding the K9 firmly by the collar. The dog continued to growl softly, not out of gratuitous aggression, but because it still sensed danger. It was as if the animal knew that the situation wasn't truly resolved. The lieutenant began interrogating the Germans right there, without formalities, without protocols. There was no time. One of the operators, startled by the dog's presence, gave away more information than he intended. He pointed to a corner of the cabin, where there was a wooden box covered with a tarp. The engineer went there, lifted the tarp, and found another firing module, a secondary one. If the first one failed, the second would activate everything automatically. It was a guarantee that the ambush would work. The lieutenant ran a hand over his face, trying to understand the extent of the threat. If this had been set up, he didn't even finish the sentence, but everyone there knew what it meant. The soldier looked at the dog and felt a strange mix of relief and unease. It was as if the K9 was expecting something even worse. The animal didn't calm down, didn't relax, didn't lie down as it usually did after capturing an enemy. Its snout remained turned towards the door, as if it were sniffing something that the humans hadn't yet noticed. The soldier stretched the leash again, trying to reassure the dog, but it was no use. The dog took 2 steps towards the exit and stopped, frozen, staring outside. The lieutenant noticed the animal's reaction and pointed his weapon toward the outside of the cabin. "Someone's coming," he said, almost in a whisper. Everyone was on alert. The silence outside was heavy. The soldier felt his heart pounding in his neck. The K9 growled louder now. It wasn't an attack growl, it was a warning growl. A few seconds later, light footsteps were heard beside the cabin. They weren't heavy soldiers' footsteps, but cautious, almost stealthy ones, as if someone knew there was danger but was still approaching. The lieutenant signaled for 2 soldiers to position themselves on either side of the door. The soldier with the K9 crouched down, keeping a firm hand on the leash, ready to release the dog if necessary. The footsteps grew closer, more defined. With each passing second, the tension increased. And then, out of nowhere, a crack, the sound of a branch breaking, came from the right. The K9 tried to advance, but the soldier held on tightly. Soon after, the shadow of a man appeared in the broken window. It was a third German. He was armed, and he didn't look like someone who was going to surrender. The man slowly raised his rifle, aiming into the hut, ready to fire at the first movement he saw. The soldier felt his stomach drop. He knew that if the German fired, the trapped operators might try to use the second detonator amidst the chaos. It was a situation that could turn into a massacre in seconds. The lieutenant signaled for everyone to stay still. Absolutely no one. The German continued raising his rifle, millimeter by millimeter, until he managed to aim completely inside. And that's when the K9 saved the day for the second time that same day. The dog pulled on the leash so hard it slipped from the soldier's hand. He darted out of the hut before anyone had time to react. The soldier instinctively ran after him, but what happened next was too fast. The K9 jumped straight at the German, hitting his rifle and knocking the enemy onto his back. The shot went off but only hit the wall behind him, sending sparks flying from the old wood. The other soldiers ran out, taking down the third man before he could recover. The soldier fell to his knees beside the dog, running his hand along its neck, feeling the animal's heavy, rapid breathing. The K9 wasn't injured, but it was agitated, as if it knew this wasn't over yet. Looking around, the soldier began to understand why. The German man had a portable radio strapped to his backpack, and on the radio, an urgent voice repeated something in German, as if asking for confirmation. "All ready, confirm the activation." The soldier felt his body go cold. That meant only one thing. They weren't waiting for the Americans to reach the ideal point. They were going to trigger the explosion anyway, that very minute. The lieutenant grabbed the radio immediately, trying to understand the scope of the situation. The engineer, standing beside the secondary detonator, began to sweat profusely. He looked at the main cable that entered through the window and disappeared into the woods. "They're going to try to trigger it from there," he said. The soldier looked at the dog, and the dog looked at him. The K9 gave a short bark, a warning bark, and at that moment the soldier understood exactly what that meant. They had run out of time. If they didn't run now, they would blow up along with the entire road. And it was the dog again who was showing the way. When the radio crackled once more, repeating the urgent message in German, everyone inside the cabin understood what it meant. There was no longer any doubt. The activation would happen anyway. The ambush no longer depended on the surrendered operator. They had another control post, another observer, another detonator capable of activating the entire system remotely. And nobody knew where this second point was, but they knew it had to be close enough to see the road and far enough away not to be easily intercepted. The lieutenant turned to the window and saw for the first time the full extent of the danger. The forest was too vast, full of twisted trunks, uneven elevations and shadows that could hide more cabins, more observers, more activation systems. The soldier in charge of the K9 felt a pang of anguish rise in his chest. He realized that even by capturing the operators and seizing the internal detonators, they were still vulnerable to external commands. In other words, seizing the cabin wouldn't solve anything. War was full of redundancies, and the Germans were experts at it. The soldier looked at the dog and saw the animal frantically sniffing the air, focused on a specific direction, the right side of the cabin where the vegetation was denser. The soldier swallowed hard. "That's the way," he thought before even saying it aloud. The lieutenant noticed the dog's reaction and decided to act without wasting time. "Move! Now!" he shouted softly but forcefully. "They're going to blow everything up. We have to find the other operator before he presses the button." It was the hardest order to carry out, because it meant blindly advancing into the woods without knowing. How many traps were in the way? The engineer was still trying to deactivate the secondary module, but it was too complicated. Cutting the wrong wires could accidentally activate the system, and dismantling everything would take more time than they had. The soldier pulled the K9 by the leash, but the dog didn't want to be pulled. It wanted to move forward. It pulled forcefully, insistently, with that urgency typical of when it detects a living threat. The K9 wasn't reacting to explosives now. It was reacting to human movement. That sense of smell that differentiated the scent of a soldier from the scent of a radio operator, from the scent of fear, from the scent of metal. The soldier felt his arm stretch, but this time he didn't try to control the dog. He let the animal lead. The group left the cabin hurriedly but without running, because running into a trap was suicide. Their steps were short, precise, silent. The sound of the German radio behind them still echoed, giving the feeling that they were being pursued by an invisible countdown. The lieutenant looked in all directions at once, searching for any reflection, any suspicious shadow, and the tension increased with each passing second. With each step they took, the feeling that someone was watching from afar grew like a constant pressure on their backs. The canine began to follow an invisible trail. He sniffed the air, the ground, the leaves. Suddenly, he stopped completely. He growled. The fur on his neck stood on end. The soldier froze beside him, raised his weapon and awaited the lieutenant's command. The dog took a step to the right, slow, careful, like someone treading on thin ice, then another, and then he stopped again, staring at a point between two trees that seemed perfectly ordinary. There was no movement, no sound, no sign whatsoever, but the dog seemed to see something that humans couldn't see. The soldier pointed his rifle in the direction indicated by the dog. The lieutenant signaled for the others to flank the area, walking along the side. The engineer, who was last, stumbled slightly on a tree trunk, and that small noise was enough to provoke a reaction from the enemy. A quick flash reflected between the leaves, the reflection of a lens, and before anyone could react, an enemy shot hit the tree next to the soldier, chipping off a piece of wood the size of a finger. The lieutenant shouted, "Contact to the right!" The exchange of fire began immediately, but it was uneven. The enemy was hidden, well camouflaged, with a clear view of the terrain. The Americans, on the other hand, were completely exposed. The K9 barked loudly, pulled on its leash, and tried to advance toward the sniper. The soldier held the dog tightly, protecting it behind a tree. The lieutenant glimpsed the sniper for a split second and signaled to the K9 handler, "He's near the detonator. It's going to have to be you and the dog." The soldier felt his blood boil. It was suicide to run to the enemy observer, under fire. But if they didn't, the detonator would be triggered, and the entire road would explode along with the approaching company. He looked at the dog. The dog looked at him. And in that instant, the soldier understood that the K9 knew exactly what it had to do. It was as if the dog was asking permission to advance. The soldier released the leash. The K9 shot through the undergrowth with incredible speed, dodging logs, leaves, holes, and low branches. It was a blur of brown and black. The German sniper tried to follow it with his sights, but the dog was too fast and too unpredictable. The soldier advanced close behind, running low, using the trees as cover. The gunfire intensified. 2 more Germans appeared from the shadows, probably part of the same ambush group. The K9 ignored them all and focused on the operator hidden behind a thick log, with a radio strapped to his chest and an improvised detonator in his hand. It was a matter of seconds. The operator raised the detonator. His finger was on the button. The K9 jumped before the soldier could scream. The dog struck the German's chest hard, knocking the enemy onto his back. The detonator fell from his hand, rolling away. The soldier ran and threw himself to the ground, grabbing the device before anyone could reach him. The operator tried to get up, but the K9 growled in his face, immobilizing him. The soldier was breathing heavily, holding the detonator as if it were a bomb about to explode, which technically it was. The lieutenant and the other soldiers arrived soon after and subdued the remaining Germans. The engineer checked the detonator and nearly collapsed when he realized something. The operator had already pressed the button halfway. If the dog had arrived a second later, a single second, everything would have gone up in flames. The soldier hugged the dog tightly, still trembling. He had no more doubts. K9 had not only found a buried cable, he had prevented the destruction of the entire company. Twice. And the most impressive thing, there was still more to discover, because after neutralizing that operator, something unexpected happened in the woods, something that nobody had predicted. When the German operator was finally subdued and the detonator secured, everyone thought the worst was over. But in war, nothing ends quickly. The lieutenant asked everyone to hold their positions, while the engineer examined the detonator the soldier had saved. The device was partially pressed. The button had been half pressed, which explained why the system hadn't yet activated. It was a more sensitive model. If the finger had completed its movement, there wouldn't have been even 3 seconds left to run. The engineer swallowed hard and said, "The dog saved us by the last inch." It was his way of admitting that if it depended only on humans, everyone would be dead. The canine soldier was still crouched beside the pup, breathing as if he'd run a marathon. The animal wasn't injured, but it wasn't completely calm either. Its body remained rigid, looking around as if it were still sniffing out danger. The soldier noticed this and felt the tension return. "What is it now?" he asked the dog softly, as if it could truly answer. But the canine was already moving, pulling on the leash toward the other side of the hill, into a denser area of the woods. Its posture wasn't one of attack. It was one of discovery, as if it had found something no one had noticed yet. The lieutenant saw the movement and sent 2 soldiers to follow. "The dog hasn't missed a single one so far. If he's going, we'll follow." The group passed between twisted trees, exposed roots, and small ravines, following the canine's scent. The soldier realized that the further they advanced, the stronger the feeling that they were about to discover the last piece of that puzzle grew. Something was missing, something that connected the whole ambush, and the dog seemed to know exactly where it was. After a few minutes of walking, the canine suddenly stopped beside a fallen tree trunk. He sniffed the air, took 2 steps back, and stared at the dark hole between the roots. The soldier shone his flashlight, but the light barely penetrated. The lieutenant approached, crouched down, and tried to get a better look. That's when he saw something that made his face harden. Wooden crates, covered with tarpaulin, stacked inside an improvised hole. The engineer ran over, lifted the tarpaulin, and immediately cursed loudly. These were explosive charges. Lots of them. Far more than necessary for a roadside ambush. There was dynamite, TNT, hand detonators, fuse tape, spare cables, and a crude map indicating installation points. It was an entire portable arsenal, hidden there, ready to be redistributed. This explained everything. The roadside ambush wasn't the objective. It was just the first part. A decoy, an opening for something even bigger. The Germans planned to detonate that road, kill the entire company, and then continue installing charges along another trail, leading to a small village further on. In other words, it wouldn't be just one attack. It would be a sequence of destructions that would completely isolate the American troops in the region. The lieutenant remained silent for a few seconds, absorbing the magnitude of it all. If it weren't for the dog, none of this would have been discovered. The company would have perished, the battalion would have been divided, and the village would have been destroyed without any chance of defense. The K9 hadn't just saved lives, it had uncovered an entire plan. A plan that would have caused weeks of delay and hundreds of deaths. The soldier approached the lieutenant and asked, "What do we do with this?" The lieutenant took a deep breath and replied, "We do what the dog ordered from the beginning. We stop it." He ordered the engineer to deactivate all the charges and for the soldiers to form a perimeter, while he called for reinforcements by radio. Within minutes, an extra team arrived, and they began to remove everything item by item. The K9 watched the process like a lookout, attentive to every movement. When everything was finally collected and catalogued, the lieutenant called the soldier and the dog over. He placed his hand on the soldier's shoulder and said, "Do you have any idea what he did today? He didn't just save us. He saved the whole operation, the whole route, and the whole advance into the interior." The soldier looked at the dog and smiled wearily. "He always knows," he replied. On the way back to the road, the K9 finally relaxed. His body, previously tense, became more relaxed. His breathing slowed. It was as if the animal had been reassured that everything was safe. The soldier noticed this and patted his head, saying softly, "It's over, partner. You did it." And for the first time since the beginning of that day, the dog wagged his tail, still without much energy, but enough to show that he was satisfied. Upon reaching the road, they saw the entire company stopped awaiting orders. The lieutenant quickly explained what had happened. When they said that everything had only been avoided because of the dog, silence fell over the group. A heavy silence, but not of fear, of respect. The K9 was the center of attention for a few seconds, but the soldier knew that the dog didn't understand praise. For him, it had all been just duty, instinct, mission. But to the men there, he was more than that. He was the hero who had seen what no human had ever seen. He was the only one who had felt the real danger. He was responsible for preventing a tragedy so great that there wasn't even an adequate word to describe it. And as everyone returned to formation, one thing became clear. That dog not only changed the fate of that platoon, he changed the course of the war in that region, and it all started with a single step that he refused to take. After all this, tell me, did you have any idea that a single dog could prevent such a great tragedy? This story teaches a clear lesson. Sometimes the detail that no one sees is what saves everyone. If this revelation has captivated you this far, leave a like, sign up, subscribe to the channel, and comment below. Which city are you watching from? Your support is what keeps these stories alive. Let's go for the next one together.